Hey, what's going on YouTube? So today I wanted to do my Week 6 college football predictions for 2015. So earlier today, the top 25 rankings, and my record last week for the predictions was 12-8, bringing me to a total of 69-30 on the year. So a rough week on my predictions. Upset of the week went wrong. Said UCLA was going to win. They did not. A few other things. Yeah, I can't really remember all of them. But anyway, so... go ahead and get started with my Week 6 predictions. So start with Washington and USC. So I think USC will stay on the right track. Cody Kessler has been looking good. Juju Smith has been looking unstoppable the entire year. I think that USC will be able to take care of this one, maybe by 14, 21 points. So move on to Illinois and Iowa. So big week last week for both teams. Both had upsets that kind of springboard them into relevance in the Big Ten. I do think that Iowa's going to be able to win this game. I think they'll be able to cover the spread at least by 10. Illinois had a nice win against Nebraska last week. Biggest win in recent history as far as I can remember for Illinois last couple of years. It's been pretty rough for their football program, so that was a big win for them. Iowa, big win last week against Wisconsin, and I think they'll get another win this week to stay undefeated. So, move on to LSU and South Carolina. So, South Carolina had a rough loss to Missouri last week. Drew Lock was able to lead Mizzou to a win. I believe it was 24-10 over South Carolina. Their offense kind of sputtered out against a decent Mizzou defense. And I think that LSU is going to be able to run all over South Carolina. Leonard Fournette's going to have another field day. South Carolina's defense is a little bit better than last year, but not a whole lot better. So, I think that LSU will be able to take advantage of that. So move on to the Red River game this week, Texas and OU. So I can't remember Red River game in recent history that had as little like Big 12 meaning as this one does. Obviously, OU still wants to just destroy Texas. Texas really wants to beat OU. I mean, really the only thing that I could see happening in this game that would change any sort of landscape to the national relevance of the Big 12 right now would actually be if Texas managed to find a way to upset OU, which I can't really see happening. So move on to, so obviously I have OU in that game. So move on to Georgia Tech and Clemson. So it's been a rough last 2 weeks for Georgia Tech. Lost to Duke and lost to North Carolina. And I don't think obviously it's not going to get any easier for them against Clemson. Clemson had a big win against Notre Dame last week, and I think they're going to get another win this week to further their ACC title hopes. So, move on to Georgia and Tennessee. So, both teams coming off rough losses last week. Tennessee, once again, not able to close out a game. So, I believe that was their third double-digit lead that they gave up to lose. And they managed to lose to a team. I feel like the only team that was in a worse situation than them, as far as hype and then expectations goes for the year. So I do think that Georgia's going to win this game pretty handily. Tennessee will compete for a little bit. I think Tennessee does have the ability, just the talent level and ability to compete with anyone in the country, but they just can't win when it comes down to it. The defense collapses, the offense can't get or isn't clutch. It's rough to watch. But anyway, move on to Wisconsin and Nebraska. So 2 teams, again, coming off rough losses last week. Wisconsin lost 10-6 to Iowa, and then Nebraska lost, I believe it was 14-13 to Illinois. I do think Nebraska is going to be able to walk away with a win in this one just because the game's at home. Wisconsin been looking real rough ever since the Alabama game. I don't think that Wisconsin's going to be able to get enough of a run game going against Nebraska. I don't think this will be a very fun game to watch. It'll probably be a defensive struggle, a lot like their games last week. So move on to Northwestern and Michigan, a Big Ten, actually probably the most entertaining Big Ten game of the weekend. I'm pretty sure Michigan's favored right now, and a lot of people are going to just say Michigan's going to take this hands down, prove that Northwestern's overrated. I don't think that's really the case. I think Northwestern's going to compete in this game. I think it'll be a lot better game than a lot of people expect it to be. I don't think anyone expected this game to have much meaning at this point in the season, though. Michigan will probably end up coming out by, I'd say, three, maybe 6 or 7 points. So, yeah, I do think Michigan's going to win and keep moving up in the polls. So, move on to Arkansas and Alabama. So I do think that Alabama's going to have a little bit of trouble with Arkansas's run game if Alex Collins is healthy. That's the big thing. Riley Williams looked really good last week for Arkansas as well. Brandon Allen hasn't been looking too solid, but the defense has been holding at least decently strong. They've been looking better. The Texas A&M game was close. They did blow a lead at the last second, but they were able to hang on against Tennessee. So I do think things are headed finally in the right direction for Arkansas. Hunter Henry was able to play, looked pretty healthy. But I don't think it's going to be near enough for them to beat a hot Alabama team right now. Alabama team that I don't know if they're going to lose for the rest of the season. I think they're heated about that Ole Miss game, and I think this Alabama team's a lot like last year's. So move on to TCU and Kansas State. So TCU just absolutely railed Texas last week, 50-7. Dawson continues to look like one of the best receivers in the country. Kansas State lost a heartbreaker to Oklahoma State in the last couple seconds, losing by a field goal, 36-34. So I do think that TCU is going to win this game. The game, I'm pretty sure, is in Manhattan though. So I do think the Kansas State is going to put up a really good fight. I think the game's going to be very close. Now, TCU just does not play that well on the road compared to how they play at home. I think that's going to continue that way. Kansas State, for the amount of uncertainty and I don't really know how to, I guess, inexperience and uncertainty they had going into the year. Pretty impressive to see what they put out on the field so far. Yeah, they had a close game against Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech's a pretty underrated team. They beat UTSA pretty handily and then competed with the top 25 team with like their fourth-string quarterback. So I do think they'll be able to compete with TCU. I think it'll be more like, for TCU, I think it's going to be more like the Texas Tech game. I think TCU is going to struggle to win on the road this year as well. But I do still think they'll walk away with maybe a touchdown or maybe a 10-point win. So move on to Florida and Missouri. So I do think this game's going to be very close, regardless of who Florida has hot that game. If it's Will Greer playing, which I do think he's the set-in-stone starter now after having such a good game against Ole Miss. However, if he does struggle, they do have to throw in Treon Harris, which I don't really see happening. I do think the Missouri's defense is going to have a very good game. I do think they have a better defense than Ole Miss has, and I do think that Missouri is going to probably keep it within 10, 12, 13 points, something like that. And they do have new life with Drew Lock at quarterback. Matty Mock was suspended. Drew Lock looked very good last week in 24-10 win they had over South Carolina, but Florida will still come over on top in the end of this game and kind of stay as the SEC East title favorites right now. So move on to Miami and Florida State. So I kind of have a two-part upset of the week, or two-game upset of the weeks, two upsets of the week this year. Jesus Christ, I can't talk. So this is one of my two upsets of the week. I do have two big ones this week. This is the first one. Like I said, Miami and Florida State. Florida State obviously hasn't really been able to close out any opponents very strongly this year. They won 24-16 against a pretty bad Wake Forest team this past week. And I do believe that Miami might be the toughest team that Florida State will have to face that Florida State has had to face all season. Boston College is pretty good, but I think Miami is going to be able to give them a tough enough test. I think that Miami will be able to close it out in the end and get the biggest win they've had in a little while. Now, I do think that Al Golden will stay on the hot seat after this game. I think this game will save his coaching career at Miami for a little bit longer. Maybe give him another month or two to kind of prove that he's worthy of being the head coach at Miami right now. I don't think he's a very good head coach for them, but I do think that Miami will be able to upset Florida State in Tallahassee. So move on to Michigan State and Rutgers. So Michigan State played a lot closer with Purdue than I think anyone saw coming last week. 24-21 win. Did not look very good, but this Rutgers team was able to make a pretty good game out of Kansas. So any team that's able to stay competitive with Kansas for an entire game, I don't think is very good. I don't think Rutgers is a very good team this year at all. Michigan State's I think they're gonna be kind of pissed off by the negative national spotlight they're getting from this Purdue loss, and I think they're gonna kind of prove that that offense is lethal. The defense is still gonna be able to hold strong and prove that they are still one of the Big Ten title favorites. So move on to Cal and Utah. So game of the week, game day is going to be there. Weird to think a couple weeks ago that this is where game day was going to be in week 6, but two teams are doing really solid right now. Jared Goff's just going as strong as ever. Utah's firing on all cylinders right now. Don't know how long Travis Wilson can stay consistent, but I don't think Cal's a good enough overall team to beat Utah. Utah's defense has been looking way too good. Devontae Booker's been looking like a stud. And as long as Travis Wilson's playing at least decently consistent, then I think Utah will be able to take care of this game. So move on to Wazoo and Oregon, Washington State, and they were pretty competitive with California last week. It was pretty impressive that they were able to hang with them for so long. I believe that Cal won 34-28. So Oregon right now, obviously, still coming off the backlash that Utah lost. They were able to get back on track last week with the 41-24 win against Colorado. But I do think that Oregon's just going to blow Wazoo out of the water in this game. The game is in Eugene. I think that Oregon's hungry to get just a huge home win. I do think that their defense is going to get up a lot of points again, but I think that the offense will be able to put up at least 50. So move on to Indiana and Penn State. So this is kind of two teams fighting for bowl spots in the Big Ten right now in the middle of the pack. So I do think that this will be a pretty entertaining game. Two teams with offenses that look like they're starting to get on the right track. Penn State played a little too close with the Army last week, an Army team that's not very good. Indiana obviously competed with the number 1 team in the nation last week, but that seems to be something that every team can do. So I do think that Indiana is going to win this game. I think that Indiana is a pretty solid football team this year. Penn State is a bi-weekly team. It's hard to get a gauge on them to see how consistent Christian Hackenberg is going to be playing that weekend. But I do think Indiana is going to win this game. So move on to Oklahoma State and West Virginia. So one of the bigger games in the Big 12 this week. So West Virginia just came off a loss to OU on the road last week, 44-24. I mean, I just think they got outmatched. It's not like they played a terrible game. I think they stayed pretty competitive for the entire game, but OU just took over in the end. If the game had been Morgantown, I mean, they might have still lost, but I think it would have been closer. Oklahoma State's been playing every team really closely this year, it seems like, in conference. So they beat Texas 30-27, then Texas just gets whooped by TCU the following week. And I don't really know how good Kansas State is going to be in conference yet, but kind of get a gauge on how good they will be against TCU this weekend. But I do think that Oklahoma State's going to keep it close, but they have not beaten West Virginia since, I believe, 2012. So I do think the trend's going to continue. I think West Virginia is going to extend their winning streak against Oklahoma State and get on the right track in Big 12 play. So move on to Navy and Notre Dame. I think this is one of the better games of the week. This is also my part 2 of my upsets of the week this week. So obviously I think Navy is going to win. I've been really high on Navy the entire year. I do think that they're going to be able to pull far enough away from Notre Dame in the first half to hold off a second half Notre Dame charge. Notre Dame seems to be much of a second half, or to be a very, very much a second half team this year. I do think the game's going to be incredibly competitive and fun to watch. One game that I really don't think anyone should miss this weekend. I think it could easily be the most fun game to watch in I won't lie, pretty weak set of games this weekend compared to last week and next weekend. Do think the Keenan Rent is going to take over the game rushing. I just think that Notre Dame has too many injuries. They came close last week against Clemson. I do think that Notre Dame's an incredibly talented team. They can be a 2 or 3 loss team this year. But I think Navy's eager to prove themselves on a national spotlight and bring home really the biggest win they possibly could this year. So move on to my last game of the week, which is Boise State and Colorado State. I don't think this one's really going to be close. Boise State seems like they've been on a mission ever since that BYU game, just dismantling Virginia 2 weeks ago and then beating Hawaii this past week. I do think they'll get a pretty big win this weekend, maybe by 20 or 30 points, and continue their trek back inside the top 20. So, yeah, those are my predictions for the week. See how they go. Like I said, last week I had a record of 12-8, my worst one so far this season. So, hopefully I have more success in week 6. Overall record 69-30. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.